I found out my husband was dead from a neighbor. Not from a doctor, not from the police, and certainly not from the hospital. Just the woman next door who saw the ambulance drive off and thought I should know. "John collapsed at the post office," she said, clutching a bag of groceries. "Massive stroke. They say he didn't make it." She said it like the weather had changed. I stood on the porch in my slippers, watching her walk back across the lawn, the silence around me slowly hardening into something permanent. That was the first moment I realized John had left me unprepared. We'd been married for 47 years. I'd stopped working when I was 30, when the children were small. He'd said I didn't need to bother anymore. "I'll take care of everything," he promised, and I let him. Not because I was lazy or helpless, but because I believed him. I believed in us. For a few days, everything blurred. Phone calls, condolences, flowers from people I hadn't seen in 20 years. The funeral was brief, expensive, and cold. Our daughter Elaine flew in from Oregon, crying for half the service and scrolling her phone the other half. I tried to forgive her. Everyone grieves differently. It wasn't until the house emptied out that I noticed the cracks. First, the phone calls from the bank. A polite man named Vincent left messages asking to settle some overdue items with Mr. Lancaster's estate. I thought it was just bills, perhaps a mistake. Then came a bounced check from our joint account, the same one John had used to pay everything from utilities to the lawn guy. I logged into the bank for the first time in years and felt my stomach clench. Less than $300 remained. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen, the kettle whistling behind me. John always handled the finances, the taxes, the insurance, the retirement accounts, all of it. I had trusted him. I had never even had the login. He said it was one less thing for you to worry about. It turns out I should have worried. The bank wouldn't discuss much over the phone. "You'll need to come in person, Mrs. Lancaster. Bring identification and any documents you have regarding the estate." Estate. That word made me laugh out loud. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the recliner with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the hours flicker past. At 3 a.m., I found our filing cabinet in the hallway closet. It was full of folders with neat labels: house, insurance, taxes, funeral. The last one made me wince. John had planned ahead, I'll give him that. And yet, the will, if there was one, wasn't there. I found a dusty manila envelope labeled Living Trust and a few old life insurance statements. Nothing recent, nothing with my name on it, no updated documents, no designated beneficiaries, just old copies and a small sticky note on one that read, "Talk to Chris." Who the hell was Chris? The next morning, I dressed carefully. Navy sweater, gray slacks, my good flats. I was too old to look elegant, but not too old to look capable. I took the binder of documents, my ID, and drove myself to the branch office on Fairview Avenue. Vincent was young, maybe 35, and had the kind of voice you only get from private school and 2 decades of gentle disappointment. He looked me over politely, then pulled up our records. "Mrs. Lancaster, I'm very sorry for your loss," he began. I nodded. "Let's talk about the account." He clicked and scrolled, then paused. "There are a few complications." "Like what?" "Well, there's the matter of the joint account, which is nearly depleted, but there's also a second account, not in joint names, solely under Mr. Lancaster." My mouth felt dry. "I didn't know about that." "No?" Vincent looked genuinely surprised. "It's been active for at least 12 years. He turned the screen toward me. The numbers made my throat close. Over $240,000, regular deposits, withdrawals every few months, most of them labeled CHP Services. What is CHP? I asked. Vincent hesitated. I'm not allowed to say, but it looks like a vendor or consulting group, possibly a personal arrangement. Do you recognize it? I shook my head. I didn't recognize any of it. And I certainly didn't recognize the woman's name listed as an authorized user. Christine Palmer? Not my daughter, not a relative, not anyone I'd ever heard of. She's listed here as a financial proxy with full access. When was that added? 7 years ago. I stood slowly, my fingers cold. Is that legal? I asked. Vincent blinked. That depends. If she had power of attorney, she didn't, I said. But the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know anything. The drive home was silent, except for the rattle in the dashboard John never got around to fixing. I stared at the road, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. 12 years of secret deposits, another woman's name on the account, a code I didn't understand, CHP Services, Christine Palmer. I parked the car in our driveway, my driveway now, I supposed, and sat with the engine off, staring at the garage door. He'd built those shelves himself, said it made him feel useful. I remember how proud he looked the day he installed the automatic opener. I remember thinking, I don't need flowers or jewelry, just a man who comes home every night. I didn't know I'd married a man who lived 2 lives. Inside the house, I poured myself a cup of cold tea, untouched from the morning, and went straight for the file cabinet again. This time, I pulled every folder out and laid them on the kitchen table like cards. Mortgage, paid off. Insurance, long expired. Medical records, Social Security, birthdays, tax returns, all in his tidy handwriting. He was nothing if not organized. But no mention of Christine Palmer, no contracts, no correspondence, no receipts. It wasn't until I got to the bottom drawer that I noticed the small fireproof safe. I had forgotten we even owned one. The key was still taped to the back, where John had hidden it decades ago. It took me 3 tries to get the rusty lock to turn. Inside were 2 things: a silver pocket watch that had belonged to his father, and a thin envelope with no label. I opened it carefully. Inside, a series of printouts, account statements from the same bank Vincent had shown me, but much older. The earliest was from 2011. The first deposit, $6,000, monthly, every single month, regular as a heartbeat. And each withdrawal, CHP Services. There were also 2 receipts made out to a Palmer Consultants, Inc. No address, just a P.O. box and a phone number. The receipts were for administrative support, totaling nearly $30,000 in 1 year. Administrative support for what? By noon, I was on the phone with a lawyer. His name was Harvey Mendel, a friend of a friend, retired now but still sharp. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, not since John and I had our will notarized. It's Mary Lancaster, I said, John's widow. Ah, Mary. His voice softened. I'm sorry. I heard. What can I do for you? I think something strange is going on with his finances. He sighed. That doesn't surprise me anymore. I told him what I knew: the hidden account, the proxy, the woman's name, the money. Do you have any documents? He asked. Yes, and the bank confirmed the account exists. Bring everything. Today, if you can. He lived in a small cottage just outside town, books stacked on every surface. Harvey didn't look surprised when I showed him the name Christine Palmer. She's come up before, he said slowly, reading the account statements. In what context? Consulting, estate planning, financial redirection, that sort of thing. What does that mean? He looked up, removing his glasses. It means your husband may have transferred assets in a way that avoids probate, possibly even to this woman. We'll need to find out." I sat there in his old leather chair, heart pounding. Could he have done that legally, without telling me? Possibly, if he had power of attorney, or if you weren't co-owner of certain assets. But we were married. Everything was shared. Not always, Mary. Not on paper. Harvey made a few calls, one to the county records office, another to a private investigator he still worked with occasionally. Then he turned to me. "Mary, do you trust me?" I nodded. Then go home. Get some rest. I'll find out what Christine Palmer is. Who she is. Back home, I stood in the living room and looked at the photos lining the mantel. John in his Navy uniform. Our wedding day. The kids when they were small. I picked up a frame with both of us on our 25th anniversary, holding hands on the deck of a cruise ship. He looked solid, reliable, real. I stared into the glass, searching his eyes for something I might have missed. A flicker of guilt. A secret. A stranger. There was nothing. That night I didn't sleep again. I lay in bed with the safe open beside me, staring at the pages, the deposits, the name Palmer scrawled over and over. In the morning, the phone rang. It was Harvey. His voice was grim. "She's real. Christine Palmer. And she's not just some accountant or secretary. She's listed as the sole beneficiary on a recent life insurance policy, dated 2 years ago." I felt the floor shift under me. "What?" "You heard me. He changed it." "But why? Who is she to him?" There was a long pause. "She's his other household, Mary. Or at least, she was." I didn't cry when Harvey said it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone or demand an explanation. I just sat there in my kitchen, still in my robe, the same teacup from yesterday untouched on the counter, and said, "All right. What now?" Harvey didn't speak for a moment. "She's listed on 3 separate documents. One as the beneficiary of that life insurance policy, another as the recipient of a private trust fund, and the third—" "Yes?" "She's named as the co-owner of a property in Camden County, a small house, transferred 6 years ago." That was when I laughed. Not from humor, from disbelief. He bought her a house. He bought another woman a house while telling me we couldn't afford to fix the roof. Harvey must have heard something in my voice. "Mary." "Thank you," I cut in. "I need a day." "Of course. Call me if you need anything." I hung up, sat there, and for the first time in all of this, I let myself feel it. Not the betrayal, not yet. Just the bone-deep stupidity of trust. I'd shared a bed with that man. Gave him my youth, my body, my hours of quiet loyalty. I'd packed his lunches and rubbed his back after long days. I'd said nothing when he took over the finances. I was the good wife, the quiet wife. And while I was cooking pot roast and folding his shirts, he was siphoning money into a hidden account and buying a life for someone else. Christine Palmer. I imagined her as young, pretty, blonde, maybe. The kind of woman who laughed easily at a man's stories and didn't ask too many questions. But I didn't know. Not yet. That afternoon, I drove to the insurance office where John had filed that last policy. I didn't make an appointment. I just walked in and asked to speak with someone. A boy with barely a beard called upstairs, then led me to a carpeted room with glass walls. A woman named Dana came in. Smart pantsuit, nice nails, cold smile. "How can I help you?" I told her who I was. Her face changed, just slightly. "Oh, Mrs. Lancaster. I see. You're familiar with my husband?" We've handled his insurance needs for years. Did you know he was married? She hesitated. I can't speak to personal matters. I think you already did. I opened my purse and laid the printouts Harvey had given me across her polished desk. This woman, Christine Palmer, is not family. She's not a spouse. I have no idea who she is. But she's listed here, repeatedly, with full rights to assets that should have come to me, and I'd like to understand how that happened. Dana glanced toward the hallway, maybe hoping someone would come in and interrupt us. No one did. Mr. Lancaster had every legal right to designate beneficiaries, she said, her voice lower now. And unless there's evidence of fraud or coercion, there might be, I said. She blinked. Excuse me? I'm not accusing anyone, not yet. But my attorney is reviewing all documentation. If anything about that signature or process is questionable, we'll find it. Dana was quiet for a moment, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin file. I shouldn't do this, she said, but I've seen too many women walk in here with no idea what their husbands were doing. You deserve to know. The file contained a copy of the beneficiary form, John's signature, his handwriting, the date, 18 months ago. There was also a passport scan. Christine Palmer, age, 58, hair, dark brown. Occupation, home care coordinator. She wasn't young, she wasn't even particularly glamorous, just a woman. A woman who had found her way into my husband's life through some door I never saw open. Dana closed the file. He said she was a longtime friend, helping him with health paperwork, managing some small business stuff. I didn't ask more. Did she ever come here with him? Once or twice, quiet, polite. She paused. He looked at her, like he used to look at you, probably, before I knew who you were. That one sentence sat in the air like smoke. I stood up. Thank you for your time. She nodded. If your attorney needs anything, we'll cooperate. I drove home slower this time, not because I was tired, but because I needed to absorb what I now knew. Christine Palmer wasn't a fantasy or a threat in a short skirt. She was a real woman, my age. Possibly a widow, possibly not. But John had trusted her, enough to leave her everything. That night I went through our bedroom, not to find secrets. I'd found enough, but to take back space. I cleared his dresser, took down 2 pictures, rearranged my side of the closet and made it all mine. I put his favorite shirts in a bag for Goodwill, left only one suit, the one he was buried in. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because of nightmares or joint pain, but because I was ready. Not angry, not grieving, just awake. Grief had settled in like dust, quiet, gray, and everywhere. But under it now was something harder. I wasn't going to let myself be erased, not by John, not by Christine Palmer, not by a legal system that thought a signature could overwrite a lifetime. I called Harvey at 7:30. He picked up on the second ring. Morning, Mary. I want to see the house, the one he gave her. There was silence for a beat. Then, are you sure? Yes. I'll drive. We pulled up to the property an hour later. It was smaller than our house, a neat little cottage tucked at the edge of a sleepy neighborhood. Cream siding, green shutters, a porch with 2 chairs and a wind chime. There was a potted fern by the door. She lives here? I asked. Harvey checked the printout in his lap. Yes, Christine Palmer, listed as owner and resident. And he paid for it? Partially, he said. The records show a mortgage, but a large cash deposit up front, from the trust fund. So not only did he set up a secret account for her, he used it to give her a home. A home I'd never seen, never heard of, a porch he never built for me. a fern he never watered in our yard. I want to talk to her, I said. Harvey frowned. Mary, not to scream, not to fight. I just want to see her face. He hesitated, then gave a single nod. Let's go. We walked up the path, and before we reached the door, it opened. She was standing there in jeans and a cardigan, hair pinned back, no makeup. Not glamorous, not threatening. Just a woman in her late 50s with a cautious expression. Can I help you? She asked. I stepped forward. You're Christine Palmer? She looked at me, not confused, not surprised, just wary. Yes. I'm Mary Lancaster, John's wife. A flush crept up her neck. She looked at Harvey, then back at me. I think you should come in, she said quietly. The living room was small but tidy. Photos on the shelves. None of John, not one. She motioned toward the couch. I didn't sit. I know about the account, I said. The property. The insurance. She nodded. I know he paid for all this. While telling me we were broke, I know he left you everything. Christine didn't defend herself. She didn't rush to explain. She just looked tired. I didn't know he hadn't told you, she said. I stared at her. You believed he was a single man? No. She shook her head. I knew he had a wife, but he said it was complicated, that you were taken care of, that everything was arranged. Taken care of? She met my eyes. I believed him. For a long time, I believed what he said. And what was that, exactly? That he was managing money for someone who helped him. That he wanted to leave something behind for me, for the time I spent helping him through his surgeries and paperwork. That his wife knew, and that she didn't want to be involved. I exhaled slowly. Did he ever say he loved you? She paused. Yes. And did you love him? She didn't answer, not in words. I saw it anyway. So that's what I was, I said. The invisible wife. The woman who paid the mortgage and cooked the dinners so he could play savior somewhere else. No, she said, quietly but firmly. You were the woman he feared disappointing. I was the woman he could lie to. That caught me off guard. Don't give me more credit than I deserve, she added. I accepted things I shouldn't have, because it was easier than asking what they really meant. She walked over to a drawer and pulled out a folder, handed it to me. These are the documents. Everything he ever gave me. If you're going to contest the will or the insurance or the property, I won't fight you. I didn't ask for any of it. I took the folder. It was thicker than I expected. Christine folded her hands. I buried my husband 10 years ago. John reminded me of him sometimes. His quiet. His routines. I think I wanted someone to protect me again. But you protected him, I said. You helped him build a world I wasn't allowed to enter. She nodded. I'm not proud of it. I turned to leave, then paused. There's one more thing, I said. Did he ever talk about me? Not just the wife, not just she knows. Did he ever say my name? Christine was quiet. Then, softly, he called you Mary, my compass. I closed my eyes, just for a moment. That evening, back at home, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder in front of me. Harvey read each page, slowly, carefully. He gave her legal rights to the property, but not full title, he said. There's room to challenge this, especially with how the funds were transferred. And the trust? Also vulnerable. It was created privately, but never finalized through probate. And some signatures look questionable. Then we go to court, I said. He looked up. Are you ready for that? I wasn't sure, but I nodded anyway. I've lived invisible for too long. That ends now. There's something sobering about walking into a lawyer's office with the full knowledge that you're about to upend your own life. Not rebuild it, not yet, but take a sledgehammer to what's left standing. Harvey met me at the courthouse steps the next morning with 2 thick folders under his arm and a cup of plain black coffee in the other. "You might want to eat something," he said, nodding at the empty paper cup in my hand. "I don't want to eat," I replied. "I want to win." Inside, the probate clerk's office was all cold floors and overhead lighting that made everything feel too bright, too real. We filed the petition to contest the distribution of John's trust and the revised life insurance policy. Harvey included copies of Christine Palmer's documents, the ones she had voluntarily handed over. "She's not your enemy," he reminded me again as we left the counter. "She's a witness," I corrected him, "not a friend." He didn't argue. Back home, the mail had arrived, most of it useless. But among the junk flyers and local coupons was a formal-looking envelope from a name I hadn't seen in years. Alan J. Lancaster. John's son from his first marriage. I'd barely seen him since his early 20s. He and John had fallen out after some long-ago disagreement about money, and I had always been kept at a polite distance. Still, I opened the letter with steady hands. It was handwritten. 1 page. "Mary, I'm sorry to reach out this way, but I heard about Dad. I also heard there's some dispute over his estate. I know we were never close, but I have some things you might want to see. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet. Alan." I stared at the letter, uncertain if it was a threat or a lifeline. Harvey raised an eyebrow when I read it aloud later that evening. "It could go either way," he said. "He might want a piece of the estate, or he might know something. Do I answer?" Harvey thought for a moment. Then, "Yes, but meet in a neutral place." I called the number Alan had written and arranged to meet him the next day at a small diner on the east side of town. The kind with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that hasn't worked in years. Alan was already there when I arrived. Older than I remembered, heavier, but his eyes were John's exactly. That same steady blue-gray. He stood when he saw me, awkwardly, and motioned to the seat across from him. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded. "You said you had something." He reached into a messenger bag and pulled out a weathered folder. "These are copies of emails my father sent me over the last 10 years. Sporadic, but revealing. He didn't want much to do with me. That was clear. But he wrote more than he probably realized." I opened the folder. The emails were printed on plain white paper, most with subject lines like FYI or off the record. They referenced money transfers, CP's support agreement, and one line that made my skin crawl. "I've kept Mary out of it. She doesn't ask, so I don't explain." Alan stirred his coffee. I think he was ashamed, or afraid, or both. "Afraid of what?" I asked. "Of losing face, of admitting that he built a second life. My mother always said he couldn't stand the idea of being ordinary." I looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" "Because," he said, "he left me nothing too, and I don't want her to get away with all of it." "She?" He smirked. "Christine Palmer. I met her once. Years ago. Thought she was just some bookkeeper. But I think she knew a lot more than she let on." I nodded slowly. "She's cooperating. She gave me the documents." "Even so," Alan said, "don't trust her fully. People lie for years, even to themselves." We sat in silence a while. Before we parted, Alan reached into his bag again. "There's one more thing." He handed me a small, leather-bound notebook. It was Dad's. I found it in a box he sent me right before he died. Probably didn't mean to. Or maybe he did. The cover was worn. Inside, handwritten notes, numbers, account transfers, dates, and then, in the back, a list. Contingencies. The word was underlined. Next to it, if M finds out, if CP backs out, if trust contested, move assets offshore, and under that, scratched in quick strokes. She'll never push. She never has. I sat there in the booth with that line burning through my eyes like acid. That's what he thought of me. That I'd never fight, never raise my voice, never step out of the kitchen and into the fire. He'd counted on my silence, on my decency. But he was wrong. The first hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. A simple probate review, the kind that passes in 10 minutes when no one objects. Only I would be objecting. Harvey filed our official statement of contest. Attached, copies of John's private notebook, Christine Palmer's receipts, and the printed emails from Alan. Enough to rattle the clean lines of a settled estate. Enough to drag John Lancaster's secrets into the light. But the court didn't care about betrayal, only about law, about signatures, paper trails, intent. That's what I had to prove, that John's intent wasn't noble, that it was hidden, manipulative, deceptive, and in some ways, cruel. In the days before the hearing, I kept to myself. No visitors, no television. Just long hours at the kitchen table, going through old photos, old letters, notes he left on the fridge. All those tiny, familiar fragments of domestic life that now felt staged. There was one note I kept rereading. Yellowed, taped to the inside of the recipe book I hadn't opened in years. Don't forget, you're the heart of the house. Love, Jay. It used to make me smile. Now I didn't know what to feel. I'd spent decades being that heart. And he'd replaced me with a contingency plan. The morning of the hearing, I wore my dark green suit, the one I hadn't touched since Elaine's wedding. I pinned my hair back with care, slipped on low heels, and chose a pair of small gold earrings. Not flashy, but solid, like me. When we arrived at the courthouse, Christine Palmer was already there, alone, no lawyer, no entourage. She stood near the wall, clutching a folder, her cardigan pressed and buttoned. She looked over as I entered. Our eyes met. She gave a slight nod, respectful, reserved. I nodded back. Let the truth do the talking. We were called into a small courtroom. Wooden benches, plain chairs, no jury. Just a judge with tired eyes and a docket full of families who once thought they'd never end up here. Harvey presented our argument calmly, methodically. Your Honor, he said, we contend that Mr. Lancaster deliberately concealed major financial activity from his spouse, diverted assets into a trust benefiting a non-family member, and misrepresented his estate. We are requesting that the trust and beneficiary designations be frozen pending investigation. The judge flipped through the documents, tapping her pen thoughtfully. Mrs. Lancaster, would you like to speak? I stood slowly, hands folded, voice steady. My husband promised to take care of me, I said. He told me I didn't need to work, that I didn't need to manage the finances, that he would handle everything. I glanced toward Christine. I believed him. For 47 years, I believed him. The judge studied me carefully. Do you have reason to believe fraud occurred? I have reason to believe I was erased, I said, not just financially, but legally, silently. She didn't flinch, just nodded. Then she turned to Christine Palmer. Ms. Palmer, do you wish to dispute the contest? Christine stood, straightened her shoulders. No, Your Honor. No, no, she repeated. I was unaware of Mrs. Lancaster's exclusion. I didn't know the extent of what Mr. Lancaster had done. I have no interest in fighting for what was never mine to begin with. The judge raised an eyebrow. Would you be willing to submit a statement of cooperation? Christine nodded. Yes, immediately. That changed everything. Harvey blinked in surprise. The judge made notes, then looked back at me. Mrs. Lancaster, with Miss Palmer's cooperation, the court will initiate a full audit of Mr. Lancaster's trust and insurance documents. If any irregularities are found, the estate will be reevaluated. I exhaled. Just a little. It may take time, she added. I've waited long enough, I said. I can wait a little longer. Back in the hallway, Christine approached me quietly. She extended a hand. I meant what I said, she murmured. I didn't know the whole truth. But I'm not here to take anything from you. I looked at her hand, then shook it. Thank you, I said. You didn't have to show up. She gave a small smile. Neither did you. But I'm glad we both did. We parted without another word. Harvey and I rode back in silence until he finally said, You did well in there. No, I said. I did what I should have done years ago. That evening, I made a list. Not of things to do, not court dates or legal steps, just names. Elaine, daughter; Alan, stepson; Christine, maybe not an enemy; Harvey, trusted. And below that, I added a single line. Mary Lancaster, not invisible. Not anymore. It rained the next morning. The kind of steady, curtain-like rain that turned the backyard into soft mud and made the wind chimes rattle low and tired. I stood at the window with a cup of tea, watching the drops slide down the glass, and thought, this is the first day I've ever truly owned. Not shared, not waited for permission, not asked what John thought. Mine. The phone rang just after 9. Harvey. The judge approved a formal estate audit, he said. I got the notice this morning. I took a slow breath. So, now what? Now we dig. The court will assign a financial examiner. They'll look at the transfers, the trust documents, insurance, and any related accounts. If anything smells even slightly off, they'll flag it. And if it's all legal? Harvey hesitated. Even if it's legal, it doesn't mean it was right. But we'll cross that bridge. After we hung up, I went to the hall closet and pulled out the 2 old boxes labeled John, personal. I'd packed them myself after the funeral, but I hadn't looked inside since. The first box was full of keepsakes, Navy medals, cards from old co-workers, church bulletins, nothing useful. But the second box held something else, a gray leather planner. John never used digital calendars, said screens made him feel dizzy. I opened the book and flipped to the back where he kept notes, reminders, and, apparently, passwords. There it was, a scribbled code I recognized from the bank file, and next to it, another name, Maddox and Brown, LLP. I didn't know what they did, but I remembered the name from a return address on an envelope John once shoved into a drawer when he thought I wasn't looking. I called Harvey. Ever heard of Maddox and Brown? Unfortunately, yes, he said. Financial law, some estate planning. But they're also known for helping people bury assets quietly. I found a note in his planner. Could they be holding something? Very possible. He made the call for me. They confirmed they had documents and agreements on file, but wouldn't release anything without a formal request from the estate administrator, which for now wasn't me. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, clutching the phone like it could give me back the last 10 years. He had hired professionals to hide things from me. Not a mistress, not a gambler, not a fool, a strategist. John Lancaster had built a quiet empire behind my back. That evening, Elaine called. It was the first time since the funeral she'd reached out on her own. "Mom," she said, "I heard about the court thing. Is it true?" "It is." There was a pause. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I sat down slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd care." "Of course I care. You flew home for one night, Elaine. You didn't ask how I was paying for the funeral. You didn't even ask if I needed help closing his accounts." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how to help. I thought you had it under control." "I did, and I didn't." Silence again. Then, "What are you going to do if they rule in your favor?" I looked around the living room. The faded curtains. The couch I bought with a sewing bonus in 1985. The worn carpet John said wasn't worth replacing. "I'm going to fix the house, fix the roof, replace the windows, and then I might take a trip." "A trip?" "Yes, Elaine, a trip. I haven't left this town in 30 years. Her voice was quiet. "Can I come visit next weekend?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, honey, you can." After the call, I pulled out a pen and paper. Not for another list this time, but a letter. "To whom it may concern, my name is Mary Lancaster. I am the legal wife and surviving spouse of John Henry Lancaster, who passed on March 12th. I am writing to formally request a full disclosure of any and all assets managed or created by Maddox and Brown, LLP, on behalf of Mr. Lancaster. I am prepared to cooperate through legal channels. Sincerely, Mary Lancaster." I folded the letter neatly and addressed it. Added a copy of the marriage certificate and the court's audit order. Let them know I wasn't just a name on paper anymore. Let them know I had a voice. That night, I slept through till morning. No dreams, no ghosts, just sleep. The response from Maddox and Brown came faster than expected. A thick envelope delivered by courier with my name spelled out in a crisp serif font. No note, no apology. Just a stack of documents held together by a gold binder clip and the kind of silence that's only ever corporate. I laid them out across the kitchen table. Harvey arrived 20 minutes later, jacket still damp from the rain. "Let's see what your husband was hiding," he muttered. There were 6 documents in total. The first, an operating agreement for a limited liability company named North Point Holdings, LLC. I blinked. He had a company? Harvey nodded slowly. A shell company, more likely. Used to hold property or assets discreetly. Look here, registered in Delaware. Classic move. The second document was worse. A transfer of funds, $180,000, from an investment account I'd never even heard of, into the name of North Point Holdings. The account was under John's name only, opened 12 years ago. No joint holder, no disclosure to me. He hadn't just set up a separate life. He'd built a financial wall between us. "Do I have a claim?" I asked. Harvey tapped his pen on the paper. "If we can prove marital funds were used to build or feed this entity, yes, especially if you were excluded without consent." The third paper chilled me. A statement of intent, handwritten and notarized, explaining that North Point was created to ensure the long-term care and financial independence of Christine Palmer should circumstances require discretion. Discretion. That word made my stomach twist. He planned for her, I said, in case she needed help, in case I found out. Harvey didn't speak. He didn't need to. The fourth document was a will, a newer one than I'd seen, dated just 6 months before his death. This version didn't mention me at all, not once. Not as spouse, not as beneficiary, just a generic clause. Any previous wills are hereby revoked. He replaced me, I said. Harvey finally looked up. He tried. The fifth and sixth documents were real estate records. One for the house Christine lived in, already known. The other, not so much. "Where's Jasper Ridge?" I asked. Harvey's eyes widened. "It's a development project, mostly vacation rentals, expensive ones." I stared at the form. John had bought a cabin in a luxury mountain town under the LLC, with funds diverted from what should have been our joint account. He had plans, getaways, secrets. While I was home scraping dried gravy off the stove and telling myself a quiet marriage was a happy one. "I want it all reviewed," I said. "Every transfer, every asset, every name." Harvey nodded. "We're building a solid case, stronger than most I've seen." "And Christine?" He folded his hands. "She submitted a formal waiver of interest. She won't fight any court decision. Said she'll testify if needed." I sat back, tired, angry, clear-headed. "She fell for a man who lied to her," I said. "I fell for the same man, but I stayed." That night, I took the old wedding album from the shelf, not because I missed him, but because I wanted to see what I had missed. There we were, in front of the courthouse, me in a second-hand dress with lace at the sleeves, John in a suit 2 sizes too big, smiling like people who didn't know yet how far trust could stretch before it breaks. Photo after photo of birthdays, barbecues, vacations at the lake. But always, I noticed now, he held the camera. He narrated the story. He arranged the angles. I had smiled at a lens while he kept the film. It was his version of our life I'd lived in. No more. I closed the album and slid it onto the bottom shelf. Tomorrow, we'd be in court again. And this time, I'd bring my own voice. The courthouse smelled like dust and old air conditioning. The kind of place where time didn't pass, it just hovered. We were scheduled for 10 a.m., courtroom 2B. When I arrived, Harvey was already there, seated near the front, organizing his notes with the same calm precision he always had. Christine Palmer sat behind him, alone again. Dressed plainly, hair tucked behind her ears. She looked more like a schoolteacher than the woman who'd quietly inherited half my husband's legacy. I didn't look away when our eyes met. She nodded once. I didn't nod back. The judge entered, robe trailing, expression unreadable. The clerk called the case. Harvey stood. "Your Honor, we are here today to present evidence that a significant portion of Mr. Lancaster's estate was created and moved in a way that deliberately excluded the legal spouse. We are also submitting proof that the funds used to create that estate originated during the marriage, making them subject to equitable distribution." The judge didn't blink. "Proceed." For the next 30 minutes, Harvey presented everything. The shell company, the bank transfers, the secret accounts, the revised will, the second property. Christine's signed waiver, Alan's supporting statements. At one point, he turned and gestured toward me. Mrs. Lancaster was not only uninformed, she was intentionally excluded. This is not a case of oversight. It is a pattern of concealment. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Lancaster, would you like to speak?" I rose, heart steady, voice low. "My husband spent years preparing for a future I didn't know existed," I said. "He told me to let him handle things, and I did. I thought that was trust. But it was silence. I kept our house running. I gave up work. I gave up control. Because I believed him when he said, 'You'll always be taken care of.'" I paused. He did take care of someone, just not me. There was a rustle behind me, someone shifting in their seat, but I didn't turn. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here because I deserve to be in the story of my own life. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you. Harvey submitted the final documents, and the judge excused us while she reviewed the file. A decision would be issued within 2 weeks. Outside, the air was warm for October. Harvey and I stood near the courthouse steps, his tie flapping slightly in the breeze. You were perfect, he said. I wasn't trying to be, I replied. I just told the truth. Christine approached us hesitantly. I want to apologize again, she said. I know that's not enough, but I don't need an apology, I cut in. I need distance. She nodded. Understood. Then she looked at Harvey. I'm leaving Wilmington. I've signed the deed for the property back to the estate. I don't want anything he left behind. Harvey gave a polite nod. We'll have the paperwork processed. Christine turned back to me. I hope someday you'll believe me when I say, I was fooled too. She walked away without waiting for an answer. I didn't stop her. Back home, the house felt different. Not heavier, not anymore, but quieter, like the air had shifted. I went into the bedroom and opened the drawer where John kept his old things, his cufflinks, his wedding ring. I took out the ring and held it in my palm. It was gold, simple, worn smooth with time. For a moment, I almost slid it onto my finger, but instead, I placed it in the envelope with the court notice and sealed it shut. Let the lawyers decide where it belonged. I had no use for it now. That night, I sat with a notebook and wrote 3 things. I am no one's afterthought. I do not apologize for surviving. I will leave my own name on everything I build from here on. The ruling came by certified mail on a Thursday afternoon. I saw the envelope through the glass of the mailbox before I even opened the gate. It had the county seal, the same formal weight of something that would change your life, one way or the other. I didn't open it outside. I took it into the kitchen, washed my hands, made tea. Then I sat at the table with the envelope in front of me like it might explode. When I finally opened it, I didn't go to the last page right away. I read every paragraph, every dry, factual sentence. The judge's words weren't dramatic. No big declarations, just careful language, precise findings. But the conclusion was clear. The trust would be dissolved. The insurance policy would be contested. The shell company's assets, including the Jasper Ridge property, would revert to the estate, and the estate would be restructured with 100% of the marital assets deemed subject to spousal claim. Me. I sat there in the quiet, blinking at the paper, the heat from my tea gone cold in my hand. I had won. No, not won. I had reclaimed. Not just money, not just houses or legal standing. I had reclaimed a voice, a place. My own damn story. Harvey called an hour later. You got it? He asked. I did. And? I think I'll sleep tonight. He laughed softly. You did more than most people would. No, I said. I did what I should have done 20 years ago. That weekend, Elaine came down. She brought croissants from a bakery she used to love as a child. The ones with raspberry filling that always stained her chin. She hugged me longer than usual at the door. I read the ruling, she said. I raised an eyebrow. You have court alerts now? No, she smiled. Alan sent it. Alan. My stepson, who had once been a shadow on the edge of John's life, now quietly standing beside mine. We'd spoken a few times since the hearing. Nothing deep, but honest. Over coffee, Elaine fidgeted. Mom, I need to say something. I waited. I was angry. When Dad died, I felt like you'd given up. I didn't understand why you didn't ask for help, why you didn't say how bad things were. I didn't think I could, I said. For years, I'd been told I didn't have to worry, that I wasn't supposed to handle those things. So when it all collapsed, I didn't know where to start. I wish I'd seen it sooner. You were grieving. No, she shook her head. I was hiding from all of it. We didn't cry. That wasn't how we did things. But she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You deserve better, she said. I know, I replied. I'm finally learning that. Later that night, I walked through the house with a yellow legal pad, making notes. The faucet in the bathroom still dripped. The back fence needed repair. The roof, definitely. But those weren't just chores now. They were choices. I could fix them because I wanted to, not because someone gave me permission. I opened the guest room closet and looked at the stack of old clothes, boxes marked John's, and a folded American flag from his Navy years. I took the flag out, gently, and placed it on the bed. Then I took everything else and began to sort. Some would be donated. Some, shredded. A few things, personal, strange, inexplicable, I simply threw away. It felt good, not cruel, just clean, like opening a window in a stuffy room. By midnight, I had cleared 3 drawers and a whole shelf. And I was smiling, not because it was over, but because something new was about to begin. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. Not by him, not by what he'd done. Just quiet. Like a place that had finally exhaled. The next morning, I took out a spiral-bound notebook I'd kept hidden in the pantry for years, where I wrote little thoughts, pieces of poems, grocery lists that never made it to the store. On the first clean page, I wrote one sentence: "No one will ever handle everything for me again." Then I underlined it. Later that day, I went to the hardware store, bought new curtains, a can of paint for the hallway, and a replacement light fixture for the kitchen John always said was too expensive to bother with. It wasn't. I just hadn't been the one to decide. The young man at the counter offered to carry it all to my car. I thanked him, but declined. He smiled like I'd surprised him. I was getting used to that. The next week was filled with paperwork. Harvey helped transfer the Jasper Ridge property into my name. I'd never owned a second home before, especially not one in the mountains, wrapped in pine trees and silence. "You should see it," he said over the phone. "It's beautiful and very well maintained." He had it cleaned monthly, apparently. Always ready. Ready for what? A future that never came, or one I was now free to rewrite? I told Harvey I'd go, just not yet. There was still more to sort here. Christine Palmer sent me a letter, handwritten, 2 pages. No apologies, just clarity. "I still think about him," she wrote, "but I no longer trust my memories of him. That's the hardest part. He was kind, but he was never honest. I thought we were building something true. I see now that I was a chapter in someone else's story, not the author. You deserved better. I hope, with time, you get it." I folded the letter and placed it in the box marked "Keep," not because it meant much, but because it was honest, at least now. Alan stopped by unexpectedly that Saturday. He brought a folder of final paperwork and 2 takeout coffees. "I figured this would all feel better with caffeine," he said. He looked older than John ever did. Something in the way he moved. Slower, less sure. But there was no sharpness in him now, just a quiet, resigned decency. As we signed the last forms, I asked, "Did your father ever say anything to you about the cabin?" Alan hesitated, then nodded. He called it his insurance plan, said everyone needed one. I laughed once, bitter. An insurance plan for what? For feeling like a good man, I think, Alan said, even when he wasn't one. We sat in silence for a while after that, no one needing to explain anything. When he left, he turned back and said, "You did what none of us could. You finished it." I didn't answer, just watched his car disappear down the street. That night, I packed a small suitcase. Nothing dramatic, just a few sweaters, a notebook, and a photograph of me on the front porch from before everything cracked open. I left the lights on, locked the door behind me, and drove to Jasper Ridge. The road was long and winding, the trees thicker than I remembered from years ago when John and I had once driven through this town on the way to a church retreat. He hadn't said a word about having property here then. The cabin sat near the top of a hill with a view of the lake in the distance. Small, wooden, quiet, clean, almost impersonal, like a hotel room dressed as a home. Inside, everything was neutral. Beige walls, plaid couch, a kitchen table set for two, though no one had ever eaten here. I opened the windows, let the mountain air in. There was a fireplace. I lit it. There were no photos, no books, no hint of a life lived, just a space waiting for meaning. I stood in the center of the room, hands on my hips. "Well," I said aloud, "you bought her a secret. Now it's mine." And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing in the ashes of someone else's choices. I felt still, not triumphant, not bitter, just steady, like I had become the center of the room. The second morning in the cabin, I didn't wake up to an alarm, or to the sound of John's cough, or to the radio he used to play too loud while shaving. I woke up because my body was rested. The sun cut through the pine trees, soft and gold. The air was thin, quiet. For a long while, I just lay there under the blanket, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering how many lies had floated through this room. But not mine. I hadn't lied. I'd endured. I made tea in the little kitchen. There was a kettle, unopened boxes of chamomile and Earl Grey. Someone had stocked it like a rental. No fingerprints, no story. I sipped slowly, watching the lake through the fogged window. And then I sat down at the table and wrote a letter. Not to John. He didn't deserve another word. To myself. You lived in silence. You loved in good faith. And when the house burned down, you stood in the ash and said, "What now?" You didn't disappear. You rebuilt. No one saw it coming. Not even you. I folded the page, slipped it into the notebook. That day, I walked the trails behind the cabin. Not far, not fast, but far enough to feel my knees ache and my lungs work and my body remind me I was still here. A woman in her 70s, alone and not afraid. I picked up pine cones and left them on the steps like offerings. By sunset, I'd decided I would keep the cabin. Not as a monument, not as some petty victory, as a retreat, a place of my own. Harvey called while I was eating toast. "Wanted to let you know," he said, "the estate audit is officially closed. You have full claim to all assets." "Even the investment accounts?" "Everyone. They ruled in your favor. It's over." I paused, not from shock, just from the weight of closure. "Thank you, Harvey, for everything. You're the one who did it, Mary." After we hung up, I sat with my toast, chewing slowly. I had money now, real money, properties, accounts, a future. But what I felt most was permission. Permission to decide, to want, to begin again. I spent a week at the cabin, painted one of the bedrooms, bought a small wooden desk and put it by the window. I started writing every morning, not memoirs, not confessions, just fragments, sentences I hadn't had time to think until now. One morning, I wrote, "He built this place thinking he'd escape something. I'm here because I faced it." I smiled at that. I called Elaine and invited her to join me next month. She said yes before I could even finish the sentence. "I want to see what you've done," she said. "It's not much yet. It doesn't have to be. You're there. That's enough." Later, I sent a short card to Alan. No long message, just, "Thank you. You helped more than you know. Mary." And to Christine Palmer, I sent nothing. Not out of bitterness. Just completion. There was nothing left to say. The day I left the cabin to return home, I stood on the porch one last time. The lake shimmered below, wind stirring the branches overhead. I closed the door behind me and locked it, not to shut something in, but to keep something safe. A piece of peace. It was mine now. All of it. Coming home felt different this time. The house was still the same. The sag in the porch steps, the slight creak in the hallway floor, the wallpaper in the dining room I never stopped disliking. But it no longer felt like a place I had to survive. It felt like a place I had reclaimed. I unpacked slowly. The sweaters from the cabin, the pine cone I brought back in my coat pocket, the notebook full of words that didn't exist a month ago. I placed them all where I wanted. No questions, no waiting. I put the pine cone on the windowsill. Elaine arrived the following weekend. She pulled into the driveway in a rental car, stepped out in jeans and a sweater that looked just like mine, and hugged me so tightly I had to laugh. "You look rested," she said. "I am." We spent the afternoon going through the attic. She wanted to help clear things out, and for once, I let her. We sorted old holiday decorations, her childhood drawings, boxes of John's tools and paperwork that had sat untouched for years. She held up a yellowed receipt. "What's this?" I glanced at it. "That was the first time your father took me to dinner. He paid in cash." Then kept the receipt like it meant something. She looked at me, head tilted. "Did it?" "I used to think so." We made 3 piles: keep, donate, toss. By evening, we'd cleared half the space. Over dinner, Elaine asked, "What are you going to do with the Jasper Ridge cabin?" "Keep it," she nodded. "Good." Then after a beat, "You ever think about selling this place?" I looked around the kitchen, the faded cabinets, the cracked tile, the window I'd stood at the day the letter arrived. "I thought about it," I said, "but not yet. I could help renovate, if you want." "I might." We didn't say anything for a while. Then she looked at me. "I'm proud of you." I blinked. For what? For not disappearing. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about how many nights I had once spent here in silence. Obedient, unquestioning, trusting in the wrong places. I wasn't that woman anymore. The next day, I called a contractor about the roof. Then I called the Women's Center down the street. The one that offered support for widows, divorcees, women who'd found themselves starting over. "I'd like to volunteer," I said. "Not as a counselor, just someone who's been through it." They welcomed me with warmth, asked if I'd be open to speaking in one of their small group meetings. "I'm not a speaker," I said. "Just tell your story," they replied. So I did. A week later, I sat in a circle of folding chairs across from women in their 40s, 60s, some older than me. I told them what I had lived through, what I hadn't seen, what I wished I'd questioned sooner. They listened without judgment. Afterward, a woman came up to me, mid-70s, hands trembling slightly. "My husband died last year," she said. And now I can't find our accounts. I thought I was crazy. You're not, I told her. You're not invisible either. She cried quietly. I held her hand. After that, I went back every Tuesday. Not to relive the past, but to make sure someone else didn't sleepwalk through theirs. At home, the windows were open more often. The curtains I bought on my own rustled in the breeze. I rearranged the living room furniture, gave away John's recliner, bought a chair I liked, deep green, soft, wide enough to curl into. Elaine sent me a photo of her dog sitting beside the pine cone I'd brought to the cabin. He's guarding it like treasure, she wrote. It was treasure, in a way, proof that even the smallest forgotten thing can mean something when it's chosen freely. The first Christmas after everything, I didn't put up the old decorations. I didn't dig through the attic for the wreath John used to hang crooked every year, or the chipped porcelain angels we bought at a church sale in '92. Instead, I bought a small tree, real, fragrant, and strung it with plain white lights and silver ribbons. No ornaments, no memories attached, just peace. Elaine came to stay for the week. She brought her dog, a shaggy thing named Milo, who shed like a blizzard, but followed me from room to room as if we'd known each other for years. I didn't mind. He was quiet company, and I liked the way he curled against my feet when I sat down. You know, Elaine said one evening, watching me wrap a gift, you're different now. Older? She laughed. No, lighter. Like you finally stopped bracing for something. I didn't answer right away. I had spent decades bracing. For disappointment, for silence, for the edge I was never quite allowed to cross. I'd made myself small in the name of harmony. And when everything fell apart, I'd expected to feel broken. But I hadn't broken. I'd grown into the space he left behind. On Christmas morning, we drank coffee in our pajamas and opened presents slowly, the way we hadn't since Elaine was a teenager. She gave me a set of watercolor pencils and a new sketchbook. I remembered you used to draw, she said. I did, I replied. I stopped. Well, she shrugged, now you can start again. I flipped through the blank pages, clean, full of possibility. Later that afternoon, I took a walk around the block. The neighborhood was quiet. Lights in the windows, the scent of pine and chimney smoke in the air. Mr. Harrell waved from his porch. Merry Christmas, Mary. Merry Christmas, I called back. It had been years since anyone in this street had used my name without pairing it with John's. I liked the way it sounded on its own. That evening, after Elaine had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. This house was built on silence, but it won't stay that way. I've painted the walls, torn up the carpet, opened every window. I've replaced the locks. I've learned how to ask the questions I used to avoid. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting. I'm here. I tore out the page and pinned it to the corkboard above the phone, where his calendar used to hang. A week later, I got a call from the Jasper Ridge property manager. There's a woman looking to rent one of the nearby cabins, she said. Asked about yours, if you were open to lending it out. What's her name? Doesn't want to say yet. Just said she knew you. Said it changed her life. I didn't have to ask. No, I said. It's not available. But tell her I hope she finds what she's looking for. I hung up gently. Then I walked through the house, room by room, with the lights dimmed and the tree glowing softly in the corner. This home was mine now. In name, in story, in every inch of air it held. I wasn't a woman rescued. I was a woman returned. The first time I stood in front of a crowd and told my story, my hands shook. It was a community event at the Women's Center. Folding chairs, weak coffee, a few polite claps as I was introduced. They called it Rebuilding After Loss. I'd agreed, thinking 10 people might show up. There were nearly 40. I told them the truth. Not the headlines, not husband hides second life or widow uncovers secret estate. Just what it felt like. To give your whole self to someone. To find out they left you crumbs. To pick up those crumbs and bake a new kind of life. I didn't cry. I didn't make it a performance. I just said the words plainly. I told them how I sat in my kitchen and thought about how small I'd made myself for the sake of peace. How I didn't even know the shape of my own name until I had to say it in court. And how I learned to say it louder. When I finished, no one clapped at first. Just silence. Then someone stood. Then another. Then the whole room. Afterward, a woman came up to me. Gray hair, soft eyes. Looked like she hadn't slept in a month. She said, "I didn't know I was allowed to be angry." I touched her hand and said, "You are. You always were." In the months that followed, the world didn't change. But I did. I hired contractors to fix the roof. Chose the color myself, slate blue. Not because it was trendy, because I liked it. I tore up the dining room carpet and put down wood floors. I bought a new kettle. I painted the front door yellow. Elaine helped with most of it. Not because she had to. Because we were learning how to be in each other's lives without shame. I visited the cabin once a month. I wrote there. Nothing fancy. Just pages about the things no one warns you about. Loneliness inside a full house. The weight of silence. The way a woman can disappear in plain sight. I donated John's Navy memorabilia to the local historical society. Gave his suits to a shelter. Kept only one thing. A compass he'd bought at a yard sale and kept in his nightstand. I didn't keep it because it was his. I kept it because it worked. A year after the ruling, I stood in my garden with a mug of tea and realized I wasn't waiting for the next thing anymore. Not the next court date, not the next apology, not the next step to fix what had already been broken. I was just living, whole, unhidden. That night, I lit a candle in the window. Not for John, for myself. To mark the house I had taken back. To mark the woman who would never again let someone else write her out of the story. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt like the walls around you belonged to someone else's dream, know this: you are not too late. You are not too quiet. You are not too small. You can begin again. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Leave a comment. Tell someone else they're allowed to speak. We don't rise alone.